They told me to shred the documents. Just like that. No questions, no paper trail, no hesitation. But something about the tone in Evan Cole's voice froze me. He didn't sound like a CEO giving orders. He sounded like a man covering his tracks. The files were marked confidential. Zurich Holdings, 2017, 2019. I'd never heard of Zurich Holdings, but Hastings and Cole had a dozen subsidiaries no one talked about. That was normal, or at least it used to be. My name's Julia Brandt, 34 years old, compliance officer. I was trained to destroy evidence when it was legal, but when I opened that folder and saw the fake invoices, the overseas transfers, the signatures of politicians, my hands stopped. My mind screamed, if I shred this, I'm part of it. So I made copies. Quietly. One by one. The hum of the scanner sounded like a heartbeat, and in that moment I knew I'd crossed a line I could never return from. Would you have done the same? Would you risk your career for the truth? Or would you pretend you never saw anything at all? Camera slowly pulls away from Julia as she stares at the copier light flickering across her face. Half in shadow, half in revelation. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt like a knock at the door. The copies sat hidden in my bag, humming like guilt. In the morning, Evans smiled at me in the elevator. The same polite smile he gave everyone, but it felt rehearsed, like he already knew. At my desk, I noticed something else. The company's internal system had locked me out of the Zurich files. Someone had sealed them permanently. The shredding order was gone from the log, like it never existed. That's when fear began to taste like static on my tongue. Later that day, Dylan from it stopped by. Younger, nervous, always tapping something. He whispered, "They're checking system logs. Anything weird happen with your access?" I lied. I had to, but his eyes told me he didn't believe a word. He leaned closer and said, "Julia, if you saw something, don't look it up again. They monitor every keystroke." I smiled back. The kind of smile you use when you're drowning and pretending to float. By evening, I'd hidden the copies under a false bottom in my desk drawer. When I returned from the restroom, someone had moved my coffee cup. Just slightly. That's all it took to confirm it. They'd been inside my workspace. From that moment, every breath in that office felt like a risk. That night, I backed up every copied file onto a small encrypted drive. I wrapped it in a napkin and hid it inside my coat pocket. Outside, the rain started again. The same rhythm as the copier light. Somewhere between fear and defiance, I made a decision. If the truth was dangerous enough to destroy, then it deserved to survive. The morning after, I couldn't look anyone in the eye. Every screen, every reflection in the elevator doors felt like a lens watching me. I'd hidden the USB drive inside an old perfume box under my bed. It should have made me feel safe. Instead, it felt like sleeping with a live grenade. At the office, no one mentioned the shredded documents again. The topic had vanished, too cleanly. But whispers have a way of spreading even when no one speaks. And when Evan Cole walked past me that day, he didn't smile. He paused, just long enough for my heart to stop. That's when I realized something simple but terrifying. They didn't need to accuse me. They just needed me to feel guilty enough to confess. That evening, I went home early. I told myself I needed rest, but truthfully, I needed distance. In my small apartment, silence was louder than any meeting room. I opened my laptop, disconnected from Wi-Fi, and checked the files again. Every number, every signature still there. Proof of a billion-dollar lie. For a moment, I thought of deleting them, pretending none of it existed. But then I remembered something Evan once said during a company seminar. Integrity is what you do when no one's watching. I smiled bitterly, because someone always was. The next morning, Dylan approached me in the corridor, avoiding eye contact. He looked worse than before, pale, jittery, glancing at the cameras on the ceiling. He whispered, "Julia, it got an alert. Someone accessed archived folders from Zurich." They're tracing it," I asked. "Can they tell who?" He swallowed hard. "They already can." That's when the walls started closing in. I realized I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was hunted. At lunch, I went outside for air. The company courtyard was quiet, only the sound of distant traffic and a fountain. A woman I didn't recognize sat nearby with a tablet. She looked up at me once, then again, too long. When I turned back, she was gone. I didn't know it yet, but that woman's face would return to me in a different context. A news article 2 weeks later, labeled investigative journalist Maya Torres. At that moment, she was just another stranger. But something in her eyes told me she already knew who I was. That night, I backed up the drive again. This time onto a hidden cloud folder under a fake project name. Training Audit 2019. As the upload bar crawled upward, I realized I'd become exactly what I used to investigate. A secret keeper, a manipulator of truth. But unlike them, I wasn't doing this for profit. I was doing it for survival. Outside my apartment window, the city lights flickered like signals. Someone somewhere was probably watching the same light from the other side. I whispered to no one, "If they find me, I want the truth to already be free." By the third week, I could feel their eyes everywhere. My computer cursor would twitch on its own. My emails disappeared seconds after I sent them. I told myself it was a glitch, but deep down I knew it wasn't. When I called it, Dylan didn't answer. His desk was empty, his chair turned slightly, like he'd just stepped away. But he never came back that day. That's when the fear turned real, not imagined, not subtle, real. Someone was digging and they were getting closer. And in a company like Hastings and Cole, monitoring isn't about safety. It's about control. That night, I walked home instead of taking the train. I wanted silence, space to think. But halfway down Wabash Avenue, I noticed a black sedan behind me. Same distance, same rhythm. Turning every corner I did. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. But when I stopped, it stopped. I crossed the street. It waited. That's when I started running, and that's when I realized this wasn't paranoia anymore. This was pursuit. The next morning, HR called me in. Frank Dillard sat behind his desk, polite smile, paperwork neatly stacked like evidence in waiting. He asked harmless questions about my projects, late-night hours, access logs, but I could feel the trap underneath every word. He said, "Julia, you've always been a team player. We just need clarity. Clarity! That's what they call it before they bury you in lies." When I left his office, I saw Evan Cole standing by the glass wall, watching. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. That night, I found a small envelope slipped under my apartment door. No name, no sender. Inside, a single printed photo of me at work, taken from above. Time-stamped 10:47 p.m. In the corner of the photo, a reflection caught my breath, my own face in the glass. They weren't just tracking my data anymore. They were tracking me. For a moment, I thought of calling the police. But how do you explain to strangers that the enemy isn't outside your company? It's inside it. 2 days later, I received an encrypted email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Inside was a single line. "You're not alone." I know what they did. Attached. A cropped screenshot of one of the Zurich files I had copied. No one outside the company could vet that. So who sent it? A warning? Or an invitation? I didn't sleep for 2 nights after the email. The unknown sender haunted me. Friend or enemy, savior or trap. Finally, I replied with one sentence, "Who are you?" No answer came. But a few hours later, a new email appeared. This time with an address, a name, Maya Torres. investigative journalist. I knew that name. She'd written about corporate fraud before and had almost lost her career for it. So I made a choice. If the walls were closing in, I'd tear them down myself. I compressed the Zurich files, encrypted them, and hit send. The moment I did, I felt both lighter and doomed. Maya called me from a blocked number the next morning. Her voice was steady, sharp. "Julia, I need to meet you. But not here. Somewhere public. Somewhere they can't control. We met in a crowded cafe near Union Station." She asked few questions but listened carefully, like someone collecting broken glass without getting cut. When I slid the drive across the table, she said quietly, "Once I open this, there's no undoing it," I whispered. "That's the point. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. In that moment, the truth had a pulse." The story broke 3 days later. Hastings and Cole accused of financial misconduct, offshore laundering, illegal political funding. My inbox exploded. Urgent meeting, security audit, staff investigation. By afternoon, security guards were stationed at every elevator. Evan Cole gave a press statement denying everything. He looked calm, almost smug, but his eyes looked directly into the camera, like a warning meant for me. That night, my company badge stopped working, and I knew they'd found out. They called me into a confidential meeting. HR, legal, and 2 men I'd never seen before. They didn't accuse me directly. They just asked strange questions about missing assets, about personal communications. Every sentence was a trap, every silence a threat. When I refused to hand over my laptop, Frank Dillard smiled. "Julia, this isn't personal. It's just procedure," I said. "Then you should follow it yourself." For the first time in weeks, I felt something powerful. Anger sharper than fear. By the end of the week, Maya's article hit the front page. "Billion-dollar cover-up. The hidden empire of Hastings and Cole." The world finally knew. But victory came with silence. My phone stopped ringing, my neighbors stopped talking, and my company terminated my access to everything. Dylan still hadn't returned to work. No one could tell me why. I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker like warnings. The truth was free now, but so was I, and that freedom felt colder than I ever imagined. The morning after the article, I was locked out of every system. No email, no phone, no ID access. I wasn't fired. Not yet. That would have been too clean. Instead, they suspended me, pending investigation. The words sounded sterile, but their meaning was clear. They were building a cage before lighting the match. When I checked my bank account that night, half my savings were frozen. Someone had filed an internal complaint accusing me of data theft. They didn't need proof. They just needed the story. And suddenly, I wasn't the whistleblower. I was the criminal. I tried calling Maya. No answer. Her number was disconnected. Her articles vanished from the news site as if they'd never existed. I searched her name. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased. Then a message popped up from a blocked number. "Stop digging. She's gone underground." For a moment, I thought it was a warning. But then I saw what followed. A photo of me entering Maya's cafe the day we met. I wasn't being warned. I was being watched. 2 days later, they called a company-wide meeting. Evan Cole stood on stage, perfectly calm, announcing an internal breach investigation. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Every head in the room turned toward me. Then he smiled and said, "Integrity will always expose itself." The room applauded. And I understood the message hidden beneath his words. They weren't after the truth anymore. They were after me. Later that evening, Dylan showed up at my apartment. He looked exhausted, his shirt untucked, eyes red. He said, "Julia, they know everything. They have your copies. They know about Maya." I asked how. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor. Finally, he whispered, I had to. They threatened my family. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to hate him, but all I could do was nod, because I understood. In this world, even loyalty had a price tag. The next morning, I received an email from HR. Final review meeting. Attendance mandatory. I already knew what it meant. They were going to fire me publicly, humiliate me quietly, and erase me completely. I printed the email and folded it carefully into my pocket. A souvenir of my own undoing. When I arrived at the office, security guards were waiting by the entrance. They took my badge. They didn't say a word. And as I walked away, I realized something powerful. They could destroy my name, but not the truth I'd set free. The morning after my termination, the story exploded again. Multiple outlets published the files. Not just Hastings and Cole, but its partners, shell companies and political donors. The documents had spread faster than any of us expected. I didn't know who had leaked them further. Maybe Maya, maybe someone inside. Reporters camped outside my apartment. My face was everywhere. The anonymous source. But anonymity was gone now. The company released a statement calling me a rogue employee. They used my name, my photo, my voice from security footage. I had wanted truth to be free. I hadn't realized it would cost me my life as I knew it. My parents called that evening. They sounded scared. They'd received a letter. Anonymous, filled with lies about me stealing company property. I told them not to believe it. But my mother cried anyway. "Julia, what did you do?" That question cut deeper than anything the company had done. Because she wasn't asking as a parent. She was asking as someone who didn't know who her daughter was anymore. The truth might have saved the public, but it shattered my family. That was the first time I wondered if justice was worth the loneliness it brings. 2 days later, I got an encrypted message. No name, just coordinates. When I followed them, it led to a small park bench overlooking the river. And there she was, Maya Torres, her hair tied back, her eyes sharper than ever. She said, "They came after me too. But your leak forced it all out before they could bury it." She handed me a small folder. Court documents, sealed testimonies, proof that federal investigators were already moving. I asked her why she risked meeting me again. She smiled faintly. Because truth without witnesses dies faster than lies. Within weeks, federal agents raided Hastings and Cole's offices. Evan Cole was photographed being escorted out, smirking like a man who still believed the system would protect him. He posted bail the same day. And as the headlines shifted from corporate corruption to insider scandal, my name faded again. The world had moved on, just as I had feared. Truth burns bright, but only for a moment before the crowd looks away. The silence that followed felt colder than their lies. That night, I packed my things. No job, no family speaking to me, no friends left at the firm. Just a small apartment filled with silence and the faint glow of the city outside. I opened my laptop one last time. The drive still held the original files, untouched. For a moment, I hovered over delete, but I couldn't do it, because even after everything, the truth was still all I had left. And maybe, one day, someone would need it again. Months passed. The world moved on. The investigations dragged through endless hearings, settlements, and silence. Evan Cole walked free after paying fines that barely scratched his fortune. Hastings and Cole changed its name, rebranded, and started hiring again. New logo, same corruption beneath the glass. And me. I rented a small apartment in a town where no one recognized my face. The story that once broke headlines had become just another forgotten news clip. But sometimes, when I walked past a television in a store window and saw my old photo flash by, I felt a strange peace, because I'd done what most people never dare to do. I told the truth. One day, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a printed article from an online paper. Whistleblower Protection Bill. Passes Senate. At the bottom, a single handwritten line. It worked. No signature, no explanation. But I knew it was from Mike. I folded the letter and placed it inside my old folder of documents. The one I couldn't bring myself to delete. For the first time, I realized the truth hadn't just destroyed something. It had built something new, even if I never got to see it. Sometimes I think about Dylan. I never heard from him again after that night. I don't know if he stayed at the company, or if guilt pushed him out. But in my dreams, I see him sitting across from me, still typing, still nervous, still looking over his shoulder. We were both victims of the same machine. One that rewards silence and punishes conscience. He was the mirror I didn't want to look into, because he reminded me how easily I could have chosen fear instead of truth. In time, I found work again. Not in finance, but teaching ethics at a local community college. When I tell my students about compliance, I don't talk about policies or codes. I tell them about choices, about how every decision leaves a mark, some visible, some buried deep inside us. And when they ask why I left corporate life, I smile and say, because one day, they told me to shred the truth, and I didn't. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they don't. But I see it in their eyes, the same quiet curiosity that once lived in mine. Late one night, I sat by the river again. Same place where I met Maya months ago. The city skyline shimmered across the water, like a reflection of everything I'd lost and everything I'd saved. For the first time, I didn't feel fear, just quiet acceptance. The world was still corrupt, still cruel, still blind to what it asks people to destroy in the name of progress. But the truth never dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to copy it instead of shredding it. And maybe that's all I was ever meant to do.